Hey, what's happening? I'm Claudio, and today I'm going to be upgrading my wife's closet. She's been living out of stacks of cardboard boxes since we got here. It's time to fix that. So stick around. Let's make it now. My wife and I sat down and modeled out what she was looking for in her new closet. As soon as she was satisfied, I made a more detailed model with all the exact dimensions. My brother-in-law Jake was here for the weekend. He helped me pick up all the materials from the home center and started cutting out all the many pieces. Almost the entire project was made with 3/4 inch MDF. Since the sheets of MDF are large and hard to handle with one person, it was great having an extra set of hands. Even so, we made a lot of rough cuts and then brought the boards down to final dimension on the table saw. In some cases, it was much easier to bring a saw to the wood and not the wood to the saw. We kept ripping boards down until the entire cut list was complete. Once everything was cut, I could organize the boards with like pieces. I cut some dados into a few of the boards to help align and strengthen the entire piece. Now I could start assembling the whole cabinet and get a great look at what it would look like in the end. I used some clamps to hold the piece together until I could get some glue and screws in place. Transferring the lines from the outside of the cabinet made it easy to locate where I needed to countersink the holes and then drill in the screws. I attached what's actually the bottom while the cabinet was upside down. I didn't want the bottom drawer sitting on the floor, so I made a kick a few inches tall to bring the cabinet up. I first tried pocket screws, but quickly resorted to glue and brad nails because the MDF started splitting. I attached some blocks in the corners and then secured the kick using screws from above. I rough cut a piece of hardboard with a jigsaw and then tacked it in place with the brad nailer. Once the hardboard was in place, I chucked up a flush trim bit to the router. I ran the router over the edge and trimmed it all off. I placed 3 dividers on the front face to section off the drawers. I used an 1/8 inch spacer on the bottom and worked my way up, gluing and nailing as I went. The top drawer is for jewelry, so it's shorter than the rest. I had to cut a groove into the drawer sides and back to accept the drawer bottoms. I made 2 passes with a standard saw blade. Using the remaining hardboard, I rough cut the drawer bottoms and then to final size on the table saw. I grabbed all the drawer pieces and began assembly. I glued the front, back, and sides together, but left the hardboard floating. I used full extension drawer slides that come apart by pushing down on the hidden tab. I marked out all the locations, made sure the slides were level, and then secured them all into place. To attach the slides to the drawers, I used another spacer lengthwise to make sure they were level. Attaching the drawers can be a little rough at first, but once you get them in all the way, they should slide easily in and out. I attached the drawer fronts using some spring clamps to hold them in place while I screwed them in from the inside. The cabinet was really starting to take shape. Now I could start installing the trim. I used some old pine 1x that I had and cut it into thin strips. This magnetic featherboard holds the boards in place really well. Marking the trim right on the cabinet is much easier than measuring. I glued and brad nailed all the pieces in place. Marking and then cutting each piece one by one will ensure you have the right fit every time. The actual building process was complete. It was time to start prepping for finish. I sanded down the rough spots and then filled all the screw holes with joint compound. I also gave the drawers a light hand sanding. Once the joint compound had dried, I could sand everything smooth. I started painting with the drawers. I rolled everything with a tiny roller and then cleaned up all the edges with a normal brush. I used a full-size roller for the cabinet in the places that it would fit. In a few spots, I had to use the tiny roller and then again, cut in the edges with a paintbrush. Once the drawers were dry, I reattached the slides using the same screw holes as before. I did the same with the drawer slides on the inside of the cabinet. I test fit the drawers on the slides, but wasn't really happy with how they were sliding. This is a real-time example of how sticky and slow the drawer slides were. Here is that same drawer slide after applying some paste wax around the bearings. It was now time to prep the closet. I sanded down some places that I had patched and applied some wall texture spray. Once the texture had dried, I could start painting. It's always nice to get a new coat of paint on the wall to liven up the space. After installing the drawer pulls, a couple shelves, and some hanging rods, the project was done. I think my favorite part is the jewelry drawer. My wife found some really nice, inexpensive tray inserts online and can now actually see all her jewelry at once. Well, it's nice to finish up another project. As with all of them, there are things I learned this time that I would change for the next one. Overall, it looks great, is incredibly functional, and most importantly, my wife likes it. If you like this project, please subscribe below. You can follow me on social media at Make It Now channel and find me on my website at makeitnow.tv. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.